Hello, good evening. um, Welcome everyone to, and thank you for choosing to spend your Thursday evening with us. My name is Dohi Morseman, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Michigan Institute for Data and AI in Society at the University of Michigan. Our institute organizes this lecture series with the support of the School of Environment and Sustainability, who has provided the space for this term. Thank you so much, C's. Before we begin, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of an introduction to who we are, if you are new to the series. Michigan has been at the university for 10 years, and we are an institution-wide organization charged with enabling the development of artificial intelligence and data science methods, the application of these methods across research fields for scientific and societal impact. These days, our focus tends to land on helping people adopt AI in research and doing so in responsible ways. We also build extensive collaboration with academia, industry, and government while doing so. So for us, the Data and AI Society in Society lecture series is relatively new. We started this series at the beginning of this calendar year, and really the reason we felt the need to start this series is because AI and the importance of data are playing such a big role in society. They are transforming society and transforming individuals' lives in ways we don't yet fully understand. And so not just among academics, but also with the public, as people, we should all together be thinking about how we want such technology to impact our lives and society and how we don't want it to do so. So, we feel that everyone should be at the table to determine what the future should look like. So this series is open to everyone. Please spread the word to your friends about the thought-provoking lectures we have coming up. And you are all welcome to view past lectures on our YouTube channel. No technical background is needed as we showcase the University of Michigan faculty who are research pioneers in their fields and special guests like today's speaker, and think deeply about the impact of AI technology. Our last speaker for this term will be in November. Professor Musharraf Chowdhury will be considering the energy impact of AI, and I hope that you will keep your eyes out for our winter series, which we will be announcing soon. In addition to this lecture series, if you are at the university and are looking to use AI in your research, please add these dates to your calendars for our generative AI tutorial series. We have 2 more sessions happening this term, and more information is on our website. And a final event I would like to bring to your attention to is our annual Data Science and AI Summit, which will be taking place November 17th and 18th. This is again, is open to everyone at the university and the larger community, and we will be featuring 5 keynote speakers who are all really prominent researchers in data science and AI, including experts such as our own Betsy Stevenson, who will be speaking on AI's impact on U.S. labor. In addition to that, I'm very excited about a university leadership panel who will be giving their vision for AI at the institution. And so you can click on that QR code for more information and to register for this event as well. We hope to see you there. Finally, a few housekeeping items for today. I skipped over the actual visual, sorry. So that's our university leadership panel. And so finally, we have a few housekeeping items for today. Bathrooms can be found on either side of the commons area, which is just outside the doors, but probably more easily accessible through that door. In the event of a fire evacuation, please exit through the doors on your left. And so that would be my right, and proceed down the external doors and out of the building. We will be opening up the floor for Q&A, and so please do be mindful of a few guidelines. But now I'd like to return our attention to the issue or the situation of AI in the Global South, and I would like to invite Professor Kentaro Toyama to come and introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Dohi, and thanks to Midas and Cease for hosting this talk. So it's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. P. Anandan, our speaker for today. Anandan and I worked together at Microsoft Research for about 10 years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but he has really had a truly illustrious career, both in AI and also in the managing of research labs that often have conducted AI research. Anandan started his career as a research scientist, working in reinforcement learning, and he was just telling me a story about how one of the first papers he co-wrote was with last year's Turing Award winner. Those of you in computer science know the Turing Award as kind of the Nobel Prize of computer science. So he started working in reinforcement learning at a time when it was really just being born. Today, it's become one of the major kind of class of algorithms that is really important to, increasingly important to the AI that we talk about today. And then he went on to initially a faculty position at Yale University, where he did a lot of computer vision research. And a lot of that research was pioneering in computer vision. And computer vision itself, you can think of it as a sub-area of AI, which focuses on the understanding of imagery and video. I met Anandan when I joined Microsoft Research, and I'll just say that, at that point already, he was really an incredible manager of research and somebody from whom I learned a lot about how to actually manage research. One of the things about Anandan is he comes across as a very kind of humble and gentle person, but he always had some scheme going on. And he would push in ways that you just didn't understand or see, but then suddenly everything would click together. And one of those things was that he eventually convinced the company to start a new research lab in India. And the company, research labs for a company like Microsoft are basically cost centers. They aren't believed to bring in any revenue, and so the companies think very hard before they're going to start something like this. And I remember for as long as I knew Anandan, he was talking about, I'm going to start a research lab in India. I'm going to start a research lab in India. And most of us would be like, yeah, okay, whatever you say. And then one day he said, Kentaro, I'm going to start a research lab in India. Bill Gates says we're on. Would you like to come with me? And for me, that was really the start of an amazing adventure. I learned a lot, both about India and about working with Anandan. I'll say something that I haven't told Anandan yet, but he was a great manager in that he really gave us a lot of room to do the things we wanted to do and make our own mistakes. But he also had these very pithy little comments that he would make at just the right time. And one of them still echoes in my mind every time I write an email and I'm editing it. He basically just said, Kentaro, emphasize the positive, right? And I had this tendency to often concede negative points before getting to the positive things. He said, no, don't do that. Emphasize the positive. And today I find myself, even now, writing emails where I better leave this out because Anandan said, emphasize the positive. Anyway, so Anandan has really had an amazing career as a research manager and lead. He has served as not only the managing director of Microsoft Research in India, but also vice president of Adobe Research, and most relevant to the talk today, he was the original CEO of the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence, which is very widely known in India for doing research to apply AI for social good. As somebody who does research in that area, I would say one of the amazing things about this organization is that it does research and very successfully translates it into implementation. They have, at this point, I think a dozen, if not a couple dozen projects in which the government of India has adopted their work, and it touches the lives of millions of people. So without further ado, Anandan.
Thank you, Kentaro. I hope, I can come through. Wow, that was very amazing. That's probably the best introduction I've ever got. And coming from Kentaro, it means a lot because Kentaro is a hard person to please. Okay, so it reminds me of the song. When some of you older people would know, you must accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. It's an old song. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So I was going to, these are some of the organizations whose work I'm using in my talk, and so don't worry about it, but the gratitude and credit to them. So now, to go back, Kentaro very famously once said this: technology is not the answer, it can amplify. This is paraphrasing, I don't remember his exact words. And then, after working in MSR India for 5 years, he came back and he kind of, I think, got a bit disillusioned with all the crazy efforts that people were making to save poor communities and society through technology, which didn't really work. No children needed a laptop, for example. So he coined this phrase, and then since then I've said, what, I'm going to amplify underlying human process using technology, and that has become my mission. My career, he already talked about it. I have a little bit of a consulting thing going, but kind of mostly not doing that, mostly relaxing. I retired 5 years ago. I turned 70 next week, so I'm having a party in New Orleans. You can all come. Okay, so enjoying doing that. So in a way, the way I want to do this, and in some sense, having slides is actually a little disadvantage, but people like to see pictures. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories, and literally each story is a narrative about a problem or solution, how people went about doing that. And then in the end, I'm going to tell you the lessons that you can learn from this experience. And there is, interestingly, a very common theme to all of this in terms of how to get things done. The first problem relates to the state of maternal and child health in India. It's surprising to know these facts even 2024, 2025. There are still many children, 2 out of 5 children die every minute. And two out of 2 children under 5 die every minute in countries like India. So things are not as great as you might imagine them to be. And one of the challenges is, how do we get the care to the people who need them? Naturally, this happens in the poorer communities, which in India would be roughly half the population. And the way in which primary health works, this is public health system that is addressed specifically towards poor communities. There is a national, sort of thing called community health centers, and they are not many, but they are kind of like the hubs around which things happen. There are about 25,000 primary health care centers. These are like little hospitals. They have equipment, they have people. Legally, by law, they are mandated to have a doctor who has a minimum medical degree, but about 40% of them actually don't have that doctor. Staffing them, getting people to go and work in rural areas is extremely difficult. So many of them are actually run by what are called auxiliary nurse midwives, who are nurses but also perform the function of a midwife, because one of the biggest things that they have to deal with is pregnancy, maternal health, child health. So they all come with a midwife training. But under those, A&Ms also run these things called sub-centers. Roughly 1 in 4 villages supposed to have a sub-center, and these are there. These function, but they're very small. Sometimes it can just be like a small room with a couple of little pieces of equipment, and the A&M is running the place. But the most important thing is about 1 million plus accredited social health activists. These are women who are from the community, typically women, who go door to door trying to provide care, often again focusing on pregnancy and child health. And these are typically women of the kind of college, high school age. They might have an 8th standard education, so on, but they can read and write, and they can use a cell phone comfortably. But today everyone uses a cell phone. Now, what I'm showing you here is how a newborn baby is typically weighed in a classical method. The baby is put in a sack, and the one on the left is actually an auxiliary nurse midwife. The Asha is on the right, and the woman in the back in blue is the mother. And you can see the mother being anxious. You really don't want to see your baby lifted using a spring balance, right? Newborn, literally, this is like less than a day old, perhaps. But this is how it's been doing, because you need to estimate the baby's birth weight, which is one of the most important indicators of potential risks. If the baby birth weight is less than 2.5 kilograms, that means you better take the baby to the hospital and get some treatments done. Many of the babies often are preterm. And if the baby is less than 1.8 kilograms, you kind of have to take them to the emergency room, put it under an incubator, and let the baby grow. It's not that those facilities are easy to come by, but at least that's what you have to do. But this weighing mechanism, which is widely being used, It's not too inaccurate, but the spring balances are very rarely calibrated, and they're often not available. Any of the money that's sent to buy new spring balances probably goes into the pocket of local politicians, and so there's a shortage of these things. So what do the ASHA workers do? They kind of guesstimate. They look at the babies, looks okay. And we saw records of baby birth weight that one particular ASHA had done over a period of 8 or 9 months. Every baby was 2.5000 kilograms. So I hope she did right. I hope the babies were actually, proper term babies. But that's the thing that was happening. So why am I showing this? When we started Vadvani AI, we looked around what kind of problems we should solve. And we always knew that maternal and child health was going to be an important thing, and we knew we could work with the primary healthcare system, and work with the ASHA workers. And so we thought of actually bringing in some kind of a digital doctor or a advisory system that the ASHAs can consult. Very quickly, most of the partners that we talked to shot it down. They said, if you bring it, they won't use it. In fact, the doctors and the system owners may actually come in the way of doing it. And the advice they give may not be relevant because, I don't think there is enough knowledge in the AI to do these kind of things. So we talked to people. Gates Foundation organized a workshop on our behalf, 2-day workshop, at the end of which, we kind of shortlisted the key problems. And the number one problem is that if you can solve the baby birth weight measuring problem using artificial intelligence, you would have, made a difference. So the team started working on it, and my colleague, my co-colleague and co-founder Rahul Panikkar, who has a Stanford PhD, and he's done some work in social sector, he came up with the following solution. And what you're seeing here, is actually the demonstration of this. What you see here is the A&M demonstrating it. She's taking a video of the baby, and she's guided in taking the video. You can see the guide on the right. And it goes one way, and then now she's going to go the other way. And so it kind of tells you to do it in some rhythm, but it doesn't really matter. All it matters is that it has certain number of images. You don't even need a video. You need 10 or 15 pictures, so there'll be enough decent ones from the different viewpoints. And at this point, it's a classical computer vision problem. If I have this many images, I can actually create a three-dimensional shape, reconstruct a three-dimensional shape of the baby, and that's what the AI is doing. Once you have the three-dimensional shape, you can measure the baby's body. So it has head circumference and torso length 53.1, head circumference 36.2 centimeters, and the birth weight is 4.08 kg. How did it get the birth weight from a bunch of pictures? Basically, once you have the shape of the baby, you get the volume. And as it turns out, newborn babies are mostly water. The specific gravity is about 1.04. I mean, most of us are mostly water actually, but the babies are even more so because the bones are light and so on. So the specific gravity tends to be fairly 1.0405, and you can measure the weight. And so this system that Vadvani AI has developed is now being piloted and tested in multiple states in India. But it didn't happen very easily. So when we started working on this, where's the data, right? So how do we create the model? So we're not going to go to villages with ASHA workers, taking pictures and collecting data. Can do that, but that's a tedious process. So we contacted one of the hospitals where most number of babies are delivered in India. It's called Nilofer Hospital in Hyderabad in the south of India. And we went there and said, hey, here's a project we want to do with you. Just be helpful to data collect. So they have a precise weighing machine. The newborn babies are weighed in a digital weighing scale. And then we had somebody work with them, collect these videos, had all the measurements and everything, and that became the data from which the machine learning was done and the AI model learned. And in fact, at one point, we even bought a 3D scanning system where we literally create a 3D shape of the baby in real form using multiple cameras and so on. Michael Black helped us procure one of those actually. So we did all this, we got the data, we got the model to work in Nilofer Hospital. Well, now it's time to go collect data in the villages. As you saw, the background in a village is not going to be a nice, clean, white piece of cloth. It could be anything. The lighting conditions may not necessarily be very friendly or favorable, so we had to adapt the algorithm. So we started doing this. The pandemic hit, and the whole work had to stop, and for a while we struggled. whether we should continue the project because the difficulty in getting it done. But eventually we did, and today we can get weighing error less than 120 grams, and and the pilot deployments is happening in union territories. And one of the reasons, by the way, in India, a lot of pilot deployments would happen in union territories, as these are where there are not state governments. These are directly managed by the central government, because the central government actually has the ability to go and say, do something. Otherwise, health is a state subject, and you have to convince the state authorities and so on to do that. So you usually don't go there first. You get it working in this, and then induce the states to say, hey, why don't you adopt this, put it in your system? And now I think it's in a few states. Now, talking about advisory systems and so on, one of my colleagues at Vadvani AI was a woman called Amrita Mahale. She was a product manager. She has a BTech in aerospace engineering. She was a rocket scientist, but then went and got an MBA degree, worked in some consulting firms, came back to India, and she left Vadvani AI after I left. She decided to go do something else. Turns out she's also a novelist. She's got 2 published novels, and she's actually a very good novelist, and I haven't read the second one yet. And so she started joining this organization called Armon, which is a very respected and well-known NGO. It's not a technology organization. Armon really focuses on providing help and care to women and mothers, especially across India, and well respected. And so she joined them because they decided they wanted to explore potentially how they can use artificial intelligence and so on in their work. And one of the things that we discovered, this was like a couple of years ago, is that they had a workflow where frontline workers, or ASHA workers also are also called FLWs, depending on which country. Some places they are called this and that. They had a kind of a training process where they would actually nowadays do the training through WhatsApp. In the olden days, you had to do training in person, but now with the advent of technology and the use of cell phones, they've been getting their training through WhatsApp, send the questions to helpline. Medical officers would reply to them, but it's not necessarily immediate. The turnaround time can be a while, a few hours, a day, and things like that, and then goes on. But what we realized is that we are at the age of large language models and conversational agents, and they work. So if we can actually adapt any LLM for that matter, doesn't matter, but with content that is relevant to the local conditions and needs, so the knowledge is more specialized, so we can guardrail it to use the data that's more relevant, and have human experts to kind of validate and so on. So this system she has built over the last couple of years, and now it's being floated everywhere. So it's basically a WhatsApp based chatbot. Fortunately, now the language capabilities of these machines are so good that you can actually have conversations. It doesn't have to be typed in or written questions. So machine translation has reached that point of stage. And so they have been testing this in different places, and looks like it's had a good take. I hear good things about her work and her success. So you can look that up, right? And this is the system architecture for those of you who really want to know if there is technology behind it. I won't dwell on it. So currently, we've got about 100 frontline workers, quite a few queries. And this is, I should say, about 6 months ago. I don't know what the status is. It's probably, more. Now, the third problem I want to talk about is moving away from pregnancy and women's health to TB. TB is one of the most destructive diseases. Even now, it kills about 1 million to 1.5 million people a year. It's a curable disease. There are enough antibiotics to get you out of TB, but still so many people die, and it kills more people than malaria and HIV combined, actually. But the biggest problem in TB is actually detecting it. The problem is people don't want to think that they have TB, so they have coughing, night sweats, but they think, I don't have TB, I have just flu or something or the other. And by the time they go to someone to actually check if they have TB, it could be a little bit late. But subsequently, every step of TB, diagnosis, treatment adherence, all of them, are causes of failure. And finally, when you get to it, very few, not very few, but about quarter of the people die as a result of TB. Now, back when I was working at Microsoft Research, Kentaro hired this brilliant scientist called Bill Thies. He was a PhD from MIT. And that was a coup because I think he rejected offers from some big name places to come and work for us. So to India, and he was always someone who wanted to, roll up his sleeves and solve a real problem. So he saw this problem and he decided adherence is really where the focus should be. So there used to be, and there is a particular mechanism. How do you ensure that someone is taking the drug? I mean, antibiotics, right? If my doctor says 7 days antibiotics and I'm feeling good after the 4th day, I'm not taking it anymore. So it's not surprising because they're not, pleasant to have. They cause all these side effects, and the TB ones are very toxic, can make you ill in other ways. So people say, I'm feeling better. A month of taking it, they don't take it anymore, right? So this thing called directly observable therapy, you actually have someone watching you take the drug, is it to ensure. But there are not enough people to cover all the people that are taking the drugs. So various systems have been attempted, and Bill came up with the simple system where at the back, if you open a pill box and take it, there is a cell phone number. You call that number, and there's an unanswered call. In India, we call it a missed call. And then you record, this person has called. So we were able to at least catch the people who were taking the drugs. So now we can assume the people who are not calling potentially did not take the drugs. I mean, it's not necessarily the case, but it helps us focus on a smaller group of population to go try to persuade them to take the drugs. So that's adopted as a part of the National TB Cure program run by the Central TB Divisions, who has really officers in every state and so on. But when we were at Vadvani AI, I said, what if we actually do this, not just based on that, but based on this data, what we are able to predict if a particular patient is more or less likely to take the drug. So it's just behavior modeling based on all the data of people who positively, in terms of taking drugs and people who don't. And we created this model. We've been testing it out, and now I believe it's being adopted. So this is it's called NICSHE is the database that were created where all the TB patients are managed and monitored, and that data set along with the various behavior patterns, we start making these predictions, and then we give it to the field staff to go say, these are the patients who are not likely to take the drugs, go pay attention to them. It's just a way of reducing the burden, increasing potentially the efficiency and throughput, and basically it addressed a lot of people. Now it's part of what's called the TB PATO model in the government of India that's being deployed and played out. But to do this, of course, we had to convince the Central TB Division to work with us. But fortunately, we had the work that Bill had already done that we can use, and the fact that we had similar background, fact that I was involved in the lab, all those things actually helped to build the trust on the part of the government to come and work with us. This is a very interesting problem. During the pandemic, all of the world shut down, India shut down. I was working in Mumbai, where Vadvani AI Institute AI is situated. One day, everything closes. We couldn't go to work. We didn't have work to do, and we couldn't do our field data collection. And so I was having these meetings, doing status things and motivating people to do this and that and all that. But suddenly, we realized that COVID is a problem where we can potentially help. So it turned out at the same time, a lot of people reached out to me from the government, from the state, central state, other organizations, and actually companies reached out to me. And I put together something called the COVID Data Science Consortium based in Mumbai. We had companies like PwC, AWS, they all actually kind of reached out to us and say, hey, can we work with you? Because we had built a bit of a reputation at that time. So we became the hub that integrated a lot of people's efforts, and they were all willing to volunteer resources, compute resources, data collection, So we started to put together a team, including a group of volunteer data scientists from Bangalore who basically weren't working at that time because of the COVID, led by a woman called Srujana Merugu, who's really a brilliant data scientist. And she brought a few friends together and my team. So we worked with a few government partners, what's called the Bangalore, it's basically the Bangalore City Council. It has this BBMP, national mission called Smart Cities Mission, and the various ministries and so on. So what happened basically is that we wanted to create a platform that would allow people to bring their data in and do various types of modeling. It's a standard epidemiological model and so on, but it was kind of put together in a way that it became usable for the health officials from the different states. So we just spent a few months doing this, and we then started trying to work with these organizations to get them to use it. So we did. One organization in particular, the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, naturally we were in Mumbai, so we worked very closely with them. I should also mention that we worked with a few scientist groups in various places to do the modeling, national and international. So we used to have these models that we created and would make forecasts and predictions. In particular, they were interested in things like how many beds would they need, how many nurses they would need. So we were making weekly predictions of all of this for the municipality of Mumbai. And Srujana actually would read all these conversations once a week, 2 or 3 hour meeting. We explained them how the data works and what it is and so on. It was a very satisfying kind of thing to do, and of course that fast. But it didn't stop with that. Post Vadvani AI, one of my colleagues' name is Raghu Dharmaraju. He was sort of the chief product officer. He left Vadvani AI as well, and he went to start another kind of institute within Indian Institute of Science called Art Park that was working on health and other problems. And he saw the opportunity to do something similar to address the spread of dengue fever in various parts of India. So he has now put together a very similar platform, working with multiple modelers, getting data from the government, working with the various field officers, both for data and for sort of reaction and so on. And this is just a little map of where they are expecting, coming up. So it's a weather-related phenomenon. So during the monsoon and the rainy weather is when the dengue increases, spread by mosquitoes and other insects, but usually, so he's been doing this. So the net is that we actually created a transformable platform as a result of the work that we did in dengue that's getting used in other places. Cotton farming. So, enough of health. This is actually quite interesting because health and agriculture are the two areas that we wanted to take up as sort of both responsible for health, wealth and poverty alleviation, and health. So, in the case of farming, cotton is a cash crop. So, for a lot of people in central India, states like Maharashtra and northern Karnataka and Telangana, cotton is livelihood, right? But cotton has this problem that it gets affected by insects. I mean, there are many problems with cotton. Sometimes, preparing the land, all those things could be issues. But many of them is not something that we can actually do anything with artificial intelligence. But insects, pesticides. So what happens is, if you use too much pesticide, of course, that's going to kill the plants, destroy the land for future. If you don't use enough pesticides, you lose a lot of crop, and you have to use it at the right time. It's not enough to wait until you see the disease on the plants. You can't see, oh, the leaves look bad or the flowers look bad. By that time, it's too late. So you have to do early detection. How does one do early detection? So it turns out that the government actually had a program with the extension workers where the agricultural extension workers would go to each village where cotton farming was happening. One farmer for a few neighboring villages, 2 or 3 villages, was selected as what's called the lead farmer. And in that farmer's farm, they would set up some traps called insect traps and other things. And amongst other things, the agricultural extension worker had a lot of different kind of duties and so forth. Amongst other things, one of the things that he would do is to take pictures of the plants and the traps, supposedly on a weekly basis, but really it didn't happen every week. And he would take those pictures and put them, give it to a central place where there are actually agricultural universities were responsible for analyzing the pictures and counting the number of moths and insects they saw. So the bollworms, the way they work is the moths come in and lay eggs on the plant, and then the eggs go inside the plant and they kind of come inside out. So they are really very destructive. The sucking insects really are destroying from the outside. In some ways, the bollworms are the most damaging ones. But you have to take the pictures of moths. So if there are a lot of moths, well, that's probably going to be a bad season. If there are few moths, then you don't have to use a lot of pesticide. So once a month or so, the agriculture experts would get together and look at all the data from the entire region or state, and for a block of 100 villages, they would issue a advisory saying, okay, you're going to have high bollworm attack, use pesticides or this amount. We actually found that their recommendations are not entirely scientific, but at least it is there. So we said, why don't we ride on that system? So we actually had farmers. This is one of our research colleagues. But Raghavendra Udupa was not there when you. Okay, so it's him. He was working with us, and so basically take pictures of these traps. These are traps where the insects get stuck, and also pictures. They had another trap, where they collect the moths, funnel trap, and then we would put them on a paper and count. So basically take pictures, and we then built a simple insect detection system using state-of-the-art computer vision. We actually had to create the data ingestion source where we train the farmers how to take pictures and upload the pictures. So we get, I think, about 5,000 images over one season. Use that as a way to sort of prepare the solution for the next season. And this model is now being integrated into the National Pest Surveillance System in 2024. And we started in 2018, so it's like a 6-year time frame. We actually got a Google award for this in 2020 or something like that. And now we're thinking about, can we expand it to other crops and other type of pests and so on. But this required working with a few government agencies, also a few NGOs. Actually, in this case, there are trade organizations. Even pesticides companies are willing to cooperate with you. Now, this is something Kentaro would know. Another wonderful thing that happened when I ran Microsoft Research India was this young, bright engineer called Rikin Gandhi, who grew up in the US and I think wanted to be an astronaut and decided not to and came back to India. Kentaro would know the story better, knocked at our door, say, I want to work for you. This is the way I tell the story. And Kentaro sent him off, go find your project, something or the other to do. So he's, there is still the case that if farmers want help and advice, they use a program called the extension system. Experts, so-called, both national, state, international, would go to the farms and spend time with them, giving them helpful advice. But turned out the farmers didn't really, like that very much because a lot of the advice was not relevant, and there was a little bit of a communication and identification gap. They didn't feel like these guys, are one of them. So Rikin actually came up with an idea, which is to go have the farmers talk about what they're doing, and put it on a video. And we would collect a bunch of videos from different farmers, put it on a DVD, and then we would take it from village to village, have a farmer go and explain, what's happening in the DVD. So this way, farmers were doing peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, and that seemed to somehow help. Farmers actually trusted because these other farmers are like them and are having the same problems. So this is the conventional extension system that both expensive and really doesn't work. And so over the years, initially it was DVDs, and now I think it put them on YouTube. Over the years, Rikin has collected a lot of videos. After 1 or 2 years, Rikin was doing so well, we had to kick him out, and he ended up asking him. He ended up starting a non-profit called Digital Green, for which he got a lot of funding from various sources, and he's still running that. And this has become a very good effort, in terms of farmers actually looking at the video and so forth. Now, 2 years ago, when again, LLMs became foray, I actually talked to Rikin and say, hey, why not use your videos to create an advisory, which can be through conversational agents and so on. So today, he's got something called farmer.chat, which is a generative AI extension agent that leverages the videos to create the knowledge, and has been working in Kenya and India, applying this to various things. So this is kind of like the questions and answers. Yeah. And I think it's got, some number of users already looking into a pathway to scale. But it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't rely on the previous work Rikin had done and all the networking and the foundations that he had laid to do this. So I'm going to stop with this. I have, several more narratives, but my point is not to tell you a lot of these stories. I can keep on telling them, right? And you can go find them better than I can tell them. But what's the point of all this? Now remember what I originally said, you can only amplify human effort. So in this case, what I learned, in order to do that, it actually takes not just doing it, but making sure that the right players are involved in doing it. In order to do social sector work impactful, we found that you have to actually bring together 4 different players. Technology, right, which is the kind of stuff I do, yeah, sure, you can build the technology, but you don't really know what the right problem to solve is. You don't know who's going to use it. You don't know how they're going to use it. Well, that type of knowledge comes from the implementers and users. And so these are usually non-government organizations. They often are kind of anti-technology and a bit cynical because they've been disappointed too many times. But you have to bring them to work with you. They are the ones who are going to deliver the solution. They are the ones who are going to help you define the problems. And then, of course, you need domain experts, health experts or agriculture experts, who tell you what is the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. And last but not least, the administrators. If the government, all these systems are government systems, all these programs are government programs. But moreover, if you want to go beyond one pilot, one state, and scale nationally, it's going to be the government who can scale it. No one else can scale it. So you have to, bring these 4 different players together. I mean, I as a technologist could do it, but to do it, you require all the foundations that I talked about. They're not going to just come because you have to build trust over the years. They have to, know you, or they have to know somebody who says this person. So a lot of it is really this, thing of meshing people together, building the community, and doing co-creation. You can't build the solution, throw it at them. They have to be there from day one in shaping the solution. They have to feel a sense of ownership to the solution, right? So to work with the Central TB Division, we had to work with the Health Ministry of India. It took us 1 year to get an MOU signed by the Joint Secretary for Health. And it's not that he did not believe us. He just wanted to be sure that we were real. So he would be giving us, I'd go sit in his office for 45 minutes, and then he would give me time for 5 minutes. And while I was doing it, 3 phone calls will come, and he'll be signing a lot of documents, and then said, okay, so come back again. So, you kind of have to do this. It's not happening on its own. But in the end, when you do it, it's tremendously rewarding. And the other thing is, you're going to ask these key questions. Just be bold and ask, is the problem really worth solving? I mean, there are so many problems to solve. You want to solve the ones that will actually have an impact. The second is does AI matter, or is it like some other problem that you really don't need to use AI, or AI is not? AI is not, I mean, maybe in the future AI is everything, but not yet quite there today. And of course, data, being there, data creation is one of the biggest obstacles. So you're going to have to build the infrastructure and so on to collect and train your models. You don't have data sitting there. You can't scarf the internet and find all the data that you want. It doesn't work like that. And there are many reasons the stakeholders may not accept the solution, and one of them is it can be a threat to their jobs. So you kind of bring them in, play some power games, and then co-creation, partners, and scaling. If one of these is not going to be positive, you're probably wasting your time doing it. Right? So that's been my experience. And one question that comes up often when I talk is, this all fine, how can MIDAS or other academic institutions can help? And they actually can help, because if you look at one organization that can get along with all these different players, it's actually a university. And if universities are willing to step in, you can't do it yourself, but you can be the synthesizer, you can be the force that brings people together. And so universities can be a neutral voice and moderate between different people. And we have students, young students, they are so impressionable. And you send them to India or Africa, they just go. They feel like, wow, this is like a nice summer project or something like that. So, and they are the ones you want to train. So you have a lot of them, and they're cheap. And one of the things is that a lot of times in social sector, the people that you're serving, they don't know how to challenge you. They feel like, oh, this is some complex technology, this is magic. Academia can be the guardian of truth to make sure that the things really work before we tell them that it works and so on. So there are things to do. The one thing I would say is that unless you have a presence in a developing country, India, Africa, wherever, even this is not possible. You cannot do it sitting remotely. You're going to have to go physically there, be there, and make things happen. So that can be a challenge, but if you find a way to do it, academia, anywhere, US, India, can actually help. tremendously. That's it. Now, Kentaro used to point out there is no profit at the bottom of the pyramid. There's a lot of gratitude and lots of smiles and rewarding experiences. So that's my talk.
So just a word of housekeeping. We can bring the mics to you if you'll raise your hand, and we'd love to take some questions.
Thank you very much for that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I have, I guess, a political question. So it seems like what's happening in this country is a sort of regression towards the kind of conditions that we have in the developing world in terms of
A lot more opportunity now. Sorry.
in terms of, dealing with things like authoritarian governments and bureaucracy and corruption, etc. As for both of you who've worked in the global south, where those conditions have been prevalent for much longer, what can the global north learn? Or let me be more specific. What can the United States, as researchers here, learn from your experiences working in India in terms of dealing with this larger political climate?
So one thing I learned is that when it comes to solving problems of underserved communities, the politics doesn't matter actually, because if you really care about solving the problem, there are institutions and programs anyway. I mean, some of them may or may not be accessible because of political climate, but there are plenty of things to do, and people let you do them. They don't say, "Oh, you're doing good social work, therefore I won't talk to you." In fact, they will talk to you. They will, support you in various ways, at many levels, even at the level of the harshest politicians. No one wants to be responsible for the destruction of lives of people. They want to be seen as a savior. And you are not challenging their political ideology. You are not challenging their religious beliefs. You're just trying to help, right? So, you may or may not be religious. In history, a lot of good philanthropic work is often done by religious institutions. So, there is a part of this which is apolitical, politically neutral. So, you just have to rely on that and go after it. And if you have, I've dealt with politicians in India whose politics and approaches diametrically opposite to mine, but I would sit happily in the same room and work with them to get this done. So you just have to, hold it back if you want to solve the problem. So yeah.
Thanks very much for your talk. Okay. I was wondering if you could square something against some of the dominant narratives that we tend to hear about AI and sort of the social impact, which is the incredible financial, infrastructural, environmental cost of AI against what you've presented here, which doesn't look like it's terribly heavy. And maybe you were simplifying it for us, that, it didn't seem like it took, the entire infrastructure of a university and multiple data centers and $5 billion worth of investment to have some of the same impacts that, the major corporations are talking about. So where do you see the disconnect?
Yeah, so I should have had one more thing in my list of questions. Is this solution affordable and sustainable? So number one thing is that when you look at the problem, you need to think about whether I can actually provide a solution that you can leverage state-of-the-art AI technology. WhatsApp is already there, right? LLMs have already been developed that I can get for cheap price or something like that. Machine learning models, computer vision models are out there in public domain that I can use. So you want to look at things that you can use, not only use, but you can continue to use during the provision of the solution. And that doesn't actually require building more infrastructure, but there is nothing wrong in leveraging the work that's already been done out there in the commercial world for your solutions, right? So we are starting with whatever there is, but it's true. The part I forgot to mention is that in doing that, if you then come up with a solution that requires a heavy data bank or storage infrastructure or compute infrastructure in order to answer these queries for farmers, you're wasting your time. And fortunately, we are not having to do that, but it does rely on commercially available LLMs and things like that. So at that point, there may come a day when they said, "Oh, it's not free," or it's going to be. But then you start, trying to approach them in a different way and say, hey, you want to give something to the society or something like that. So, but yeah, you don't have the resources to invest. You don't have the capital. You don't have the human resources. You don't have the technical expertise to actually invest and build a large system. You're relying on a bunch of ragtag researchers and a bunch of graduate students or something like that, right? And NGOs who don't actually have a lot of money. So you kind of have to work with that, but you can build, particular solutions for problems at that level. That's what you'll do. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciated all the examples that you're able to present, and your career it's crazy what you've been able to get done. So I think as someone who's maybe earlier on in their research and their work, I obviously see that key component is developing those relationships with very different disciplines and different groups. I think, maybe later on you might be able to get people come to you, but what's your best advice to get some of those people in the room, especially when you're starting off? Maybe you are a newer PhD researcher. Like how do you entice people to do the work, to come together so you can develop something that's actually worthwhile?
There is not one thing, right? And first of all, we have to say there are many PhDs. I was a PhD student. I never thought of these problems when I was a PhD student. I just wanted to do computer vision, reinforcement learning, and write good papers and become successful at that. Nothing wrong with that. So but people who come to MIDOS and so on may have a different ilk. They might say, hey, I really want to save the world or something like that. Well, if you have that, right, then you're already at a PhD student level oriented the right way. But one thing you have to learn is that you're not going to do it sitting in your office in Detroit, even in the warmest months, which I hear is like half a month or something like that, but I'm just kidding. So you're going to have to look for ways to get out there. Go out there and, spend some time where the problem is. And, you got to work with your advisor. If your advisor doesn't encourage that, then the wrong advisor, right? So you kind of have to expose yourself to the problems. We had an amazing internship program. Kentaro had the most number of interns in the lab, I think, and it was the most popular program. I'm not kidding. For me, that was good because I like to have parties, and there had a lot more young people to have parties with. So you literally need to go out there and find places like Vadvani AI or many such institutions in countries like India and other countries in Africa would welcome. Now, one of the things you can do as an academic institution is create such program to send students out there to spend a summer or a fall. So that's the most important thing, is the exposure, right? The more you have exposure, the less you're likely to waste your time doing the wrong thing. And you'll build the networks also, right? So start young.
Thank you for this talk, and it's very inspiring. I actually am at the tail end of my career, and I started by going to India to learn Hindi and have done all kinds of things. So I'm actually asking you specifically about the language. There were so many I heard Telugu, I heard Hindi being in that first app. How are you working back and forth between a very monolingual
So I personally, I'm Tamil. I refused to learn Hindi when I was 15 or something for some political reasons, actually. I never did, but I like Hindi songs and movies. But I would sit in government meetings where everybody would speak in Hindi, and they were kind enough to make sure that I understood enough of it. India is a multilingual culture, and you will find ways around it, no matter where you go. People would help you translate. You don't even have to know Hindi for that matter. I mean, it helps if you want to directly communicate, but you'll always find somebody who will go with you. I never found, working across India, I worked in different states, I never found the language actually to be any kind of problem. So, there are enough people in my team who spoke Hindi. I didn't. They would tell me what's going on, but even they would not, when they speak Hindi, they wouldn't speak Tamil, and we worked with farmers in Tamil Nadu, but somebody else would go. So the thing about India is that we've always had to live with the multilingual concept. We have translators, and they're just human beings. But today, maybe, I don't know, you could speak to your laptop, WhatsApp, and they can. It might be even easier. I would not worry at all about the language barrier.
Well, I'm actually asking. I teach a class called Language Justice in South Asia, where I have a picture of Tamil activists trying to burn a sign that's in Hindi. So there's a long history of that that's quite
that's okay.
Has a lot of vitality. But specifically, when you're looking at these language models, is that something that's a conscious part of what you're doing? Like, is it more expensive that you're working in all these different languages? I understand on the ground.
It has to be adopted or adapted to every language, right? Hindi is not enough. If you go to the interiors and rural areas of India, regardless of any state, except for the Hindi belt, there won't be any Hindi. You got to speak Telugu or Bengali or Gujarati, maybe closer to Hindi, Punjabi closer to Bihari, maybe Oriya. You got to speak those languages, and the farmers are usually of that ilk. They don't necessarily know Hindi. But so you have to build user interfaces. But today that's a lot easier than it used to be, right? I mean, machine translation has become so mature, even for Indian languages. I think you're seeing more and more. Anecdotally, my wife is good at writing, so she wrote a blog when her mother passed away in Tamil. And then that was like 20 years ago, 20 years ago. Then recently she gave it to some LLM, notebook LLM. It read the whole thing, and then it produced this critical conversation between two people speaking in English, a man and a woman's voice, dissecting this Tamil article in English. And she said, man, she didn't realize she had so much insight when she wrote that article. So that's where AI, I think, is really getting there. So. Okay, yeah.
Thank you for a wonderful talk, Anandan. My question is, it seems like a lot of your career for the Global South and social goods started with you going to India with,
Kentaro.
starting a Kentaro, Microsoft Asia research.
Yeah.
I wonder how that worked out under the hood. I mean, you kind of said, okay, it worked out, but like it must have been like a lot of difficult persuasion, things like that.
Yeah.
So wonder how you managed to persuade these people like Bill Gates, or moving forward, how did you persuade people to help you support making these Wadhwani AI Institute and so on?
So with the Microsoft Research India, it was a multi-year campaign, as Kentaro mentioned. I actually started by creating an internship program for Indian college students to come to Microsoft Research to do internships. And that's because I felt Indian, BTech students were so good, and Microsoft Research would only take PhD students. So there was no PhD program in India in computer science. But these undergraduates, in my opinion, were just as good. So I convinced my then manager to give me 5 slots to do, India intern. So he was very involved in this. So he helped me convince the management and all that. So they came. Within a year, they were super popular, and so everybody wanted more India interns. So there was a little bit of a buzz. And then in, I think, 2004, I got asked to go to India to review the work done by the Media Lab Asia, which was a collaboration between MIT Media Lab and the government of India, which was actually working on ICT for development. I went there, I loved their projects, but I hated the partnership. I felt this was MIT exploiting India rather than really an Media Lab kind of trying to push their brand. And they're taking a lot of money from the Indian government for doing this. So I had a chance to meet the IT minister, then IT minister of India, because the Microsoft guy was very close to the government, the country head. So he asked me to meet him, and because the money was going out of his pocket, and I think he didn't want to spend it. And when I told my critical opinions, he said, you meet the minister. So I told him, this is my view, and actually you really should do this, but you don't need MIT. And he canceled the contract with MIT within a month after that. So I came back and told my management, look, there's this opportunity, we should do something. And then I kept pushing it, and one thing led to the other. So it's a long process. You kind of, the way I look at it is that if you have a goal, everything that happens seems to be a path towards that goal. So you just use it. That's it.
So potholes?
No, path. Something happens, I can use that to get where I want to go. So you just, use it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I was just curious, so what change have you seen maybe in the mindset of Indian academia as like, the role of technology? I mean, I studied in an engineering school, but we never interfaced with many of, the non-profits, let's say, or, I'm just curious.
So we found not much of the Indian academia came to play, and I won't blame them, right? Because they are trying to establish themselves in their disciplines. Like for instance, the number of PhDs in computer science graduating out of India in 2005 was less than 35. That's not right. I would rather see more PhDs, and we did work on this when we were in India with the Indian institutions. And now it's about 2,000. So that's their goal. That should be their priority, right? But in that, there may be a few professors in IIT Delhi and Bombay and IIIT Hyderabad. There are professors who are particularly motivated towards these kind of problems. IIT Madras has something now, but that need not be their priority. I would say, if you find someone, you're lucky. You find it wherever. So I'm saying, I would rather the Indian academic institution be good at doing top in their research area and then simply be known for working on poor countries' problems. That's actually can be a stamp against them, right, in their career. So even though they want to do it, that's not an ambitious enough goal, right? So if they do it, it's fine. But I don't want. I would rather, in the limited time and resources, make them excellent in what they do.
Thank you. So many global health ideas, right? And so I work in global health. Until several months ago, I worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Oh, I got a lot of money from your side, by the way, for the TB work.
So I wondered.
Yeah.
So like a few kind of layered questions and thoughts in there. Like if we go back to the baby weighing, right, the early one. So that is a question of like, well then, so there's this fantastic like AI generated solution. What are your observations and experiences about the scaling and extension of that, into many countries in Africa, as an example? So that's kind of one thing. And then the other one is much more like looking forward. If we look at the massive loss of funding and technical capability, right? Yeah. And now across many of those countries, you have supply chains that just fundamentally are not working because there's so much loss of people. And you have these logistics and management information systems, which without ongoing funding, they will start to fall apart, right? And even thinking about some of the work that I might be doing right now, where there's this need to basically quickly scan data in countries that have very limited management information systems, and you try to look at purchase orders quickly and scan months and months of data for like what pricing they're buying products at. And I'm just, I guess, really curious about your thoughts around where can we start to leverage AI technology, but you still need the funding to do that. And because everything fundamentally is so commercially driven. It's a world of capitalism. So how do you achieve the good social impact, whether it's in agriculture or health, if there are not major donors? And certainly the Gates Foundation, because they care so much about technology, it's like, well, is this a niche for them? So it's kind of this big question of like, what happens now that at least for the foreseeable future, an entity like USAID is gone? Thank you.
So there are, I should say, there are 2 or 3 different answers to that, right? And they are a little bit contradictory with each other that I'm going to give you. One of them, the good news or bad news, is that don't worry, this capitalism dominating prioritization, this problem of lack of enough funding, it's always been there. Okay, it was there 50 years ago, or that 20 years ago, it's there today. In other words, whatever you had to do, right, you had to do when you're working in the global sector, in development sector, at stringent conditions with constant risk of funding. Getting FCRA in India has been extremely difficult. Vadvani AI, the last I checked, doesn't have FCRA. I mean, this is crazy because it's an institution that's actually quite friendly to the government. Still, we had the Prime Minister inaugurate our institute, still can't get FCRA. So these kind of obstacles have been there for any number of reasons, political reasons, capitalism reasons, but we have been able to do things, right? Now, so what it means that it's not as if the world has gone bad all of a sudden. It's actually been always difficult. Gates Foundation, you mentioned, and other philanthropic organizations. The part that is contradicting it, I think the biggest loss is actually USAID. I mean, to me, USAID funding, reduction. I mean, when I heard about it, I was literally, it was just shocking. It's like, because it's been so important in so many countries. We don't see it as companies, because USAID is feeding the government, funding the government to implement their programs, without which they cannot actually work with us, right? That is, I would say, the single biggest loss. I have no idea if that can be, compensated. Any amount of private funding will never match the USAID funding. I think it was kind of by far the largest donor for a long time. Even the Gates Foundation can't match that as far as it's the biggest private donor. So this loss, I don't know how you can undo. But the point is, even if that took away, say, 30% or 25%, whatever the percentage of the global philanthropic funding that USAID did, you still have the 75%. And the problem wasn't any easier just because you had the extra 25%. So we just have to work a little bit more, look for more funding and be more clever and things like that. And all those issues that you mentioned about tracking spending system, they've always been there. They are not changed anymore. So my point is, yes, all of these are true, and these are the reasons, right, why this problem is hard. If it were not the case, there'll be a lot of people doing it. These are the reasons why Midas and Vadvani have to do it. Somebody has to do it. The key problem, though, that I think you might have referred to, is paying for technology. See, lots of philanthropic organizations, even the Gates Foundation, would pay for programs, and they won't pay for technology solutions. And just because they are skeptical, see, they want to count the value of every paisa, every dollar that they spend. And when you do program funding for an NGO that's going to do vaccinations or working with agriculture, you can actually measure your progress proportional to what you're doing. Technology is more indirect. So that requires a little bit of a long-term thinking, right? Its impact is not going to be immediate. So I found it not that easy to raise additional funding. Thanks to Sunil and Ramesh, we got $3 million a year, but I raised about $20 million, 10 of which came from USAID. So it's, getting someone to pay for technology. Indian philanthropists, they don't pay for technology. They're just not that convinced that that's the right thing to spend. That's the biggest challenge. That challenge has always been there. I should say that's not a new challenge. But you kind of have to, work that much harder.
Yeah. But Gates will actually do volume guarantees.
They would do that. Yeah, but they.
In effect, on products.
Yeah.
Through volume guarantees.
Yeah.
So.
But now they have an AI task force. Okay, I know they have an AI task force now.
Right.
And I advise them time to time. But even they are a little bit, the money they are spending on the AI task force is nothing. The foundation has what, $6 or $7 billion here. Probably the AI task force has like $100 million. That's not, in my opinion, they are still shy. And that's because, who's the global health president? My friend, what's his name? Anyway, he doesn't believe in technologies. So these things are there. Yeah, so not new, but yes, I agree.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much. This has been very insightful for me. And I was very intrigued by some of your slides where you said that you had a Venn diagram where there were technologists, where there were government agencies, NGOs coming together. And one of the statement that was made was, you can't do it all. You have to co-create it.
Yeah.
And you have to let them into your bubble and show them the value. So I'm curious on what were some of the trade-offs between technologists and the government of India or, the NGOs during those conversations, and how important is data security and privacy of the users using these technologies in those conversations?
So two different questions, I'll take them separately. One is, what were the trade-offs for the different groups to come together and work on it? As a matter of fact, actually, there is not a lot of trade-offs. See, I'm not going to convince my scientists to go work on this problem unless they believe that it was worth their time to apply the science to do that. And I'm not going to convince the NGO partner to come and work with us unless I convince them that actually I'm working on a problem that they needed to solve, and that in fact I'm able to solve it. They're not interested in cool technology demos. I'm not going to convince the government agency or organization unless it fits in somewhere with their health programs and health systems. It's not enough it solves it. If it's going to create a new program or system, they're going to be reluctant, right? But it turns out there are enough problems where you can do this, right? So there's not a trade-off as much as finding those niche opportunities where everybody has, a will. So it's really more finding the place where we can all work together, right? As far as privacy and security is concerned, to me it's a much talked about subject, but I don't really believe that it's actually been solved in AI. I don't assume, for me, in a developed society, nothing I do is private or secure. So as far as developing countries where the problems are more desperate, yes, it's important to do, but it's not the first thing that you worry about. You worry about solving the problem. But what you can do actually is to develop practices. When you build this data collection system, you build them, you are building them. So you can build them in a way that it minimizes any such risk. Can it be abused by a political party to do? Absolutely. You may not have control over it because they own it in the end. Yeah. So the government can abuse anything they want. As you know, they do. So I think you can do about it.
Hi. So the solutions that you were talking about, I was kind of seeing two different basic patterns. Like one is there's a central knowledge base that you've built, and individuals on their smartphones can access it with local information and get answers back about what's happening there. And then in the case of like the COVID outbreak analysis, you're actually gathering information remotely and building a new model, right? And then making decisions that kind of more centrally. Yeah. Do you find that like when you're building solutions, like do you find patterns, like how much of your time is you're able to like replicate that pattern from one solution to the next one, and it's saving you that much more time in the next project, and how much of it is like you really have to start from scratch because the domain knowledge is just that different, or I don't know, like
so there are actually three kinds of solutions. Okay, there are not two. One is just what I call point solutions. The one for the pest management, right? You take a picture, it tells you how much pest infestation. Rather than waiting 1 month, you get it in a few minutes, right? Or the baby weight. These are point technology solutions, like an app if you want to think about it, right? There is that category. Then there is this platform where it requires collaboration in terms of skills, right? The disease modeling skills may be one place. The data collection capability, I'm talking about the COVID and all those things. There are platforms which fundamentally are frameworks, if you will call them, fundamentally require different human resources to be there to be doing this. It's not just technology. I mean, modeling is a very active research area. So there are things where I think you kind of have to bring organizations and agencies who have different skills to come in and put their skills into a common platform framework that we do. And the third is what you said, which is actually, sponging off of some kind of a knowledge-based information system that's out there in order to answer your question. This is really what, all your ChatGPT and so on are doing, right? That model, right? So, back in the day when I went to India, we wanted to build a decision support system, and we decided not to. So in medicine, it's called the decision support system, health system. Because building the decision support system, getting it to use and so on. But once the LLM took over, everybody wanted a decision support system. Now, even though they didn't know that's what they wanted. So a lot of these things are riding that wave. So I would say there are three. Ones that, take knowledge from a more global sort of source of knowledge and, customize it for your needs, your domain, and then personally to you. ones that are, and each of them, right, you learn different things. So in the case of point solutions, you learn the importance of understanding the usage scenario, the use case. So if this particular problem has to be solved, you need to have someone who's going to be able to apply that app in that particular situation. Who's the user? So it's very typical app, problem actually. The middle one is much more of a, it's actually the most complex because it requires slow moving bodies to come together and so on. But what we did from COVID, we are able, and then Raghu was able to translate to dengue, is because the experience that we had and what to expect different people to do. So that's the one that really translated. But technology components are completely different. Modeling COVID and dengue is not the same thing. Reasons, the way in which it's transmitted, all of that is different, right? In COVID, it's a lot human-to-human contact. This is through insects, right? Dengue and so on. So you need to model it completely differently. And the third one, which is this, now we are learning, right? I have only a couple of examples of projects. I think there are more that are happening. We are learning actually, the key things are actually making sure that the knowledge source are contextualized and customized. So you cannot just rely on the global knowledge. The communication, the language translation, the user interface turns out to be paramount importance, and trust building over time, and using existing methods of training and learning and teaching as a way of getting the stuff in. So these kind of things are the things that you learn. So you learn different things. I don't know what else people would learn.
Thank you for your talk. So let me go back to your comment about government officials. I think you said something like they still want people to be healthy or to help people.
At least, yeah,
okay.
I think so.
So that's hopeful. I think we should be hopeful. So, but have you encountered government officials who are purely driven by their political ideology?
Not in this context. I mean, the political ideologies may be there, but I never saw in one occasion someone said, I'm wanting to support this group of this religious group or this political leaning or anything like that. No, they wouldn't tell me. They might have that, but how they use it, who they give it to may be selected by that. I wouldn't know. But in the context of creating the solution, I didn't see anyone coming in with their political views. And I helped write the National AI Strategy paper. I talked to the Prime Minister, and he kind of, he asked me, what should we do? And I sort of told him. So the night before I met him, they sent me, can you give talking points? So I kind of talked about what different countries are doing in AI. And then he said, what should India do? And I said, do AI for all. And then but all of that experience was really, really pleasant. I must say that I probably would not even be in the same place with this political group ever. My leanings are very different, but I never had a problem working with them.
Do you think the current, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, current US climate is similar to that? Or
I actually think if you're doing these kind of things, and staying away from whatever, it's exciting right now, but I think you can get it done. But unfortunately, I don't know. There is no government, there is no money. It's a different problem. So I don't know if you can rely on see, in many ways, when it comes to handling problems of poor communities and so on, countries like India and Africa are way ahead because US never had to deal with it, right? Because we have always relied on the market forces, and now US has got that growing, group of underserved communities. I don't think the US knows how to take care of them. So that's a different problem, not political. It's institutional learnings.
So, very nice talk. I'm thinking about one aspect, right? I mean, in the last 4-5 years, the whole AI tools have kind of scaled up quite a bit. I mean, it's almost that a 16-year-old can build an app to solve a problem, right? How do you see this playing out now in terms of solving these problems, right? Traditionally, we have always thought about institutions or big players solving small people's problem. Like, do you see that game changing with these tools?
Big institutions have never solved small people's problem. Okay, that's a myth. Okay, the only big institution that has ever tried to solve people problem is the government. And it does or does not, and you can see different countries how they are doing related to how the government is doing. I went to Vietnam, right, and the country was devastated after 1975. Today, it's you wouldn't even call it a developing country, right? The will of the government has actually made it happen, way more ahead than India and other countries, right, which are doing this longer. So I do think that big people has been the one that matters, but nobody else has actually been there. Yeah.
Like build on that, it's more. I mean, the way at least we see that on the corporate side, right? Is slowly like individual domain experts are like less critical than somebody who can go in and like look at a big picture, solve the problem.
Individual, technical domain experts are the least critical for the problems we are trying to solve, right? What matters is people who can work with technology. This is not going to give you best paper prize in any conference. Although we did manage to get something somewhere, but that's a different story. It's probably an ICTD conference or something like that. So when Kentaro came to India, we had him create an ICTD conference just to make this kind of work respectable. Right? I think it's still going on, right? ICTD conference. So he was the one who started that whole trend. And we did it because we said, how do we make this field respectable? Get researchers, put a conference and give them best paper prizes. They'll come.
Very nice.
Another question for you. If you took a project like back to the baby weighing app, and I realize that was maybe a few years ago you developed it, but
it's actually ongoing. I'm not involved in it because I left in 2021 and came back and retired. But the organization is doing it.
So I'm not a data science person. Yeah. I'm not an AI person. So I have no concept of what the investment is to develop something like that. If you were just to give illustrative budgets in terms of
let me think in the time my budget was during that time, maybe the annual budget was spending like $6 or $7 million a year, right?
30 million
for the entire lab. $6 or $7 million a year was my budget, out of which this might have eaten up. It was not the largest project because it was still experimental. I'm going to guess I spent, in the time that I was running Madhvani, in the 4 years or so, about $1.5 million to $2 million on this project. Since then, they probably spent some. And I'm going to guess they probably spent about $5 million over the course of this project to get where they are. I'm including people costs and equipment costs and things like that. The biggest one, of course, is people costs. So I don't know that it can be done. $5 million is not too much, right? I mean, I can get not I, but Gates Foundation would give you a $5 million grant if they believed in it, right? That's not a problem. The Gates actually gave us a grant for this project, and that probably spent by now. Yeah, so a lot of it was done using their funding. So then maybe it's a little more than that. A lot of it, we tried to spend the Gates money on this project, mostly not the Vadhvani guys' money, because it was paid for that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, looking at the solutions you've presented to us, these are small people problems. They don't take up so much infrastructure, but I can see here in US the AI development needs quite some expensive infrastructure and raising social concerns. So I wanted to ask your view, like what could be done to make everyone comfortable with the technological advancements around AI and all the solutions that AI wants to put forward?
So, see, one of the advantages of working in India, right, is that there is actually a deep technology foundation and base in India. There's been a lot of investment in basic technology, even AI. And we are able to, a lot of these solutions can easily be developed in India because we have that knowledge base, we have those resources and so on, right? This is not done for social sector. This is done because it's seen as an economic agenda, an industrial agenda, and growth agenda for the country, right? And AI that's its biggest problem, right? I was talking to Kentaro today about the various reasons AI may not be survived. One of them is that it's not sustainable. The way in which AI is currently being done requires resources, money and resources. I cannot imagine at that scale, eventually, I don't mean in the next 20, 50 years, the long term, it's sucking up so many resources unless we learn as scientists and technologists to find a way to create AI at much lower cost energy-wise, I'm talking about other resources-wise, right? So we were talking about biology versus AI. So biology is got an advantage, it's super efficient in using resources. Machines, we've not got them there. So right now, if a country wants to, have AI capabilities, it needs to find a way to invest in that larger infrastructure, not for social sector, but for the country's economy and growth. It just has to do that. It's very hard, but this will be a big. I'm sure we are definitely going to see AI haves and AI have-nots because of this reason, the capital expense. This is already there, or it's coming. But you need that not for this reason. Again, don't do AI for social good. Don't do AI only for social good. If AI is there, use it for social good. Okay, it would be a wrong thing to do, because the incentives that are there for building big technology, which is profit, money, growth, are not there. Life saving has not actually been an important goal. So yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you so much for a riveting lecture. Thank you so much for all of your insight. And thank you so much. Please join me in a final round.
Thank you. But thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, because now that I'm retired, this is kind of what I do for fun. Well, amongst other things. So.
For all of you who are with us today, if you would like, you can use a QR code to fill out our survey. There are some paper-based surveys at the table that you can use instead. And we hope to see you at our next lecture in November. Thank you.